right? We've got to run a company, and at the same time, we have to lead with empathy. So I would say that there's not a formula. I think it's a situation by situation, trial by fire, if you will, basis. But I do think it's important just to have real conversations with people. And it's to say, you know, no, Steve, pick up the baby. We have to be able to be authentic in our communication, because that's the only way that I think we're going to grow and be able to look at the mirror and really see ourselves. So I don't know if I have a real good formulaic answer for you, but I think if we just lean in with courage and authenticity in our communications and lead with humanity, we can come up with those solutions.
I like that. That's great.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
This is Professor John Sibley Butler from your MBA program. I want to know, 5G and the virus has really sped up changes in business models. And I think that the business will change. You know, here in Austin, I was director of IC Square. We did the Austin Technology Incubator, created all these companies. And I want to know from you, I think that the COVID has really changed business models, and there will be losers and there will be winners. I think with 5G coming on, I think with Google purchasing, trying to really get into the grid, my question to you is, how do you see the business models changing for technology companies based on, first of all, communications with the software companies, and then based on how people do business? So right now, here we are on Zoom. Does this mean that hotels will be really suffering? Will airlines suffer in the future? Will Microsoft stop paying an average of $10 million to send its people to professional meetings? How do you see that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think is fascinating is how much we realize that we can do virtually. I mean, in full transparency, Microsoft, even though we make a lot of productivity tools and products that many of you probably use to run your business, we weren't really big on remote work. It was, hey, you get an offer from Microsoft, you come to Microsoft, and that could be in Austin or it could be in Seattle. But, you know, we passed up on really great talented candidates because they couldn't relocate. So I think what we've learned is how productive we can be virtually, and at the same time, how inefficient that can be as well. People talk about craving human interaction, and I think that's why you see, you know, reports of individuals that might go to social outings, right? Because they're just so tired of being at home, they just crave that interaction, and sometimes they're getting sick, and sometimes that they're not. But I just don't know that we realize how important that human connection was. So again, as I said, there's kind of this exacerbation on both sides, which is, wow, we can do a lot with technology. And at the same time, that human connection is critical. You know, Microsoft is as you know, at the cutting edge with a lot of technology. Sorry if you hear the dog in the back, somebody rang the doorbell, of course, at the perfect time. That's the other thing. We get to see the human side of how we live every day, right?
That's
I think
right.
I saw a baby there. I think I saw a baby in one of the pictures, which
Yes.
I absolutely love. But yeah, the dog just threw me off my train of thought. As you know, Microsoft has some of the coolest technology, and some of the technology that I get to work with, it's almost like a scene out of Star Trek. We are experimenting with, you know, holographic images, you know, how, you know, really bringing into reality this idea of, you know, having a meeting in person with our holographic image. And that technology is real, it's there, I've seen it through a product called HoloLens. And so in some ways it's pushing us to be even more innovative in our business models and really strive for what's possible.
It's wonderful. That's good. Thank you so much.
So those are some of the things I'm seeing.
Love it. Very helpful. Kimberly has a question here. She's an entrepreneur. She's asking, do you have any advice for women in the workplace?
And as it relates to this particular pandemic, or just in general, or?
Kimberly, would you add anything to clarify that?
In general.
Um, well, I think it depends on what your objective is. I mean, I think if it's women in the workplace as it relates to, I think raising children and managing family, and work, that I might take a different direction. If it's not really related to that, and maybe all more so about, the glass ceiling. So maybe a little more clarity on your question, I could be more helpful.
I would, in either of those questions you'd like to answer.
Okay.
Sounds like both would be helpful. Yeah.
Sure, both would be helpful.
Yeah.
Well, look, I have a 14-year-old son. Can't believe he's 14. He's 5'10". He's bigger than me now. I think you heard me talk about him on Sunday if you listened in. He's a sweet boy, but very active. And, as mom, I'm just mom. If I'm on a conference call, if I'm talking to other executives, if I'm leading a meeting of 100 people, it doesn't matter. I want a sandwich, or I want, mom, help me with this, or, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me, or, I mean, he doesn't really have a girlfriend, but I'm just saying, the realities of a 14-year-old and what he cares about don't go away because I'm working at home. And so, I guess my personal philosophy, and I think this is all very personal, and certainly moms can weigh in on the call, but because he's older, I can say things like, "Hey, mommy's on the call." When I'm on a call, usually my meetings are 30 minutes. Hey, I'm probably anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. I'm being off of the call, and then sometimes he doesn't really listen to that. But he comes first, like today, what was I doing? I was in between calls running him to a park where he plays basketball with the group of kids that we've kind of been quarantining with. And, it's better than him sitting around doing Xbox all afternoon. But it didn't really fit with my schedule. And so I'm on calls and I'm running him, here and there. My husband was, doing some other things. I couldn't make it work. But I think that boundaries, because I've heard women talk about, well, my company doesn't provide boundaries. And I think as moms and dads, we have to create those boundaries and say, here's what I'm going to be doing. Here's what I'm not going to be doing. I've never really waited for the company to say, here's the boundary, because I just don't think that ever happens. And so I have to live out my value set. And if that means taking calls in the car, if that means moving a meeting back so that I can have a conversation with my son. He came to me the other day, had something happen that he really needed to talk with me about. And I had a call coming up, but I could see in his eyes he really needed me in that moment. He didn't want to talk to his dad. And so I just said, hey, I'm going to be late to this meeting. And it was an important meeting and I was 20 minutes late, but he came first. So I think the key is, our kids only have, I know my son, I only have 4 more years before he goes to college. And the time that I have with him is precious. And that he needs me, I might be in a meeting. And because I'm physically there, I have more accessible. So there's a good and a bad to that. But I also have to manage that proactively with my leaders and my team and my colleagues. And I'm okay with that.
Good.
I've always done that, even when he was 2.
Yeah.
Never be, apologetic for that. That's just my personal value.
And what about the glass ceiling?
Feels like we could do a whole call on that. I will tell you that I talked about this on Sunday. I just didn't think it was real. I thought, well, that happens to some people, but hey, I have an MBA from University of Texas in Austin, and I've had all these great experiences, but our country, our business community is evolving. And look, my mother tells me she lives vicariously through me because, she said that when she was my age, she didn't have the opportunities that I have to work at companies like Microsoft. So, she tells a story about applying for a job at NASA. And she was the best candidate. I think she was the only one with a college degree. She went to Southern University in Louisiana, was back in the 60s in Louisiana. She would have been part of the Hidden Figures crew, if you've ever seen that movie. But that was kind of the era that she was in. And the the hiring manager wanted to bring her on badly, but there was someone at the more senior levels who did not want to hire a Black female. And so she got all the way to the very, very end. I think the hiring manager did everything he could. He really went to bat, and she didn't get hired. And she wonders what kind of career she might have had she had the opportunity to work at NASA back in the 60s when they were sending a man to the moon.
Wow.
So I think about those kinds of stories, and, you know, I've certainly had doors closed for me that should have been opened. And at the same time, I've had doors open for me that should have been closed. And so I guess the way that I think about it is I have to move on to the next opportunity, right? If the door's closed, I can stand there and bang on the door. And that's not wrong either. I know some people have taken that path, but I really quickly refocus. I'm a believer in this philosophy with lots of things. But there's going to be some people who are going to be your champions, whether it's championing you or your work, and they're just all in, all out for you, right? There's always this population of people who are not sure. And there's people who I say never get on the bus. They're not going to get on the bus. It's about you or about your work. And so you identify those champions and you build those alliances. And you are intentional in terms of what it is you want and your goals. And don't be shy about saying what it is you want, then do good work. And those champions have been the ones that have helped me grow and develop and advance in my career.
Good, thank you for that. Very helpful. We also have a question here in the chat from Maggie, talking about your advice for keeping people's interest involved to help in a nonprofit organization. I mean, I guess a broader question is, just keeping people engaged in the middle of all this. What thoughts do you have about that?
This is such a great time to be at a nonprofit because, back at our church, we have more people looking to give now than ever before. What's clear is that if it wasn't before, the number of people who are hurting, who are without jobs right now, who are hurting because of trying to care for loved ones, or just even afraid with neighbors, family members that are very susceptible to the virus, and you're just living in this fear. So I find right now that there are so many people willing to give that it's a wonderful time to be giving people that opportunity. And so if you're in a nonprofit, again, look for those champions, because I actually think there's perhaps more people out there than ever before who recognize, wow, I'm really blessed, or I am, the needs of the people are so visible. I want to be a contributor to that. That's just my personal experience. And then there's just question is, plugging those folks into the right place. And I would also say, if you're a part of a nonprofit, and of course, you're working in a nonprofit, but find other ways to give as well. Because that's a spiritual principle, as you give, you multiply, that gift multiplies.
Yeah, it's good. Well, for those of you who just came in a little bit after we got started, my name is Eric Bryant. This is hosted by Gateway, a church in Austin. We're very excited to have Monica Pool Knox of Microsoft with us. Monica, the next question does intersect kind of faith and business from Jennifer. How would you react as a follower of Jesus when the business world might compromise your spiritual beliefs? It goes against the corporate. And for those of you, wherever you're at in your spiritual journey, just think in terms of it might cross a value. How do you handle that, or even guide your employees in that?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is choose wisely, right? Understand before you go to work for a company. And I'm obviously if you're starting your own company, you get the chance, you get the opportunity to decide what kind of company it is. So for those of you that are going to work elsewhere, choose wisely so that you don't feel that what you're doing is compromising your faith, just to begin with. Like, for example, I could never work for a tobacco company. I've had opportunities to do that because I don't believe in that. That's not something that's aligned with my values. And so however that's true for each of you, I think that's the first step. And then the reality is, because we work with believers and unbelievers, we work just with whoever we come into contact with, we're going to find ourselves in situations where you feel that things aren't right. And I mean, I've certainly have my fair share of that. I've also spoken up and felt like I did what was right, and have had retaliation and other things. And so I just think that that's par for the course. And so what I would say is, it's so important that, before you start the day, you pray, you meditate, you get your center, and be led, not driven. Take your time and really hear from the Lord in terms of what you should do. In some cases, you need to move on because you're maybe in an environment that the Lord wants you out of. In other cases, you need to stay because you're the light and the voice that needs to be present. And I can't really speak, for each individual situation that you might come into contact with. What I could say for me is there have been, both of those times where it was time to go and it was time to stay. And sometimes, I've felt that it was time to stay and then it was time to go. And then the other thing is, things change around you too. So you think, okay, I'm in this situation, and all of a sudden just things happen that you just could have never predicted. But here's what I can tell you is, whenever I've had a situation where I felt like somebody did things that were unbecoming towards me, there was always some negative consequence for them that I could have never orchestrated. I mean, I can tell you stories. It's amazing, some of the things. And so you stay true to you and don't allow for other people's bad behavior to give you permission for bad behavior, even though you might feel sometimes like, you want to say a few things or do a few things, but you have to have a standard around which you live by, and you have to go to sleep at night and feel like you've done the right thing. And so it's very personal. This is why I say it's important to be prayed up, that you're getting led, and that you also have accountability, somebody that you can speak with, whether that's a spouse or a friend that you can get a perspective from. I think those times have really, those resources and those people have really helped me during those times.
Thank you. That's very, very good. Jerry has a really good question, and being in your particular role, I wonder if you've come into this situation. But politics seems to color so many conversations right now. And when we hear comments that are divisive or disrespectful in the workplace with people we interact with, it's difficult not to engage, especially when it can affect the working relationship. What is your advice? Or do you guys even have policies about things like this?
Yeah, we do. But I mean, our policies have more to do with things like, harassment or creating a hostile work environment. And that can happen in lots of different ways, right? I mean, it seems these days political statements can be that.
Yeah.
The Bible teaches us to be in harmony and not to quickly engage in conflict. Just for conflict's sake. I wish I could, get the scripture for you. Maybe, some of you are more quickly can get to verses, can pull that up. But, the Spirit of Christ is reconciliation. And so we can certainly find things with others that we don't agree upon. But the Spirit of Christ is really about coming together upon the things that we do agree upon. And there's power in agreement. And so for me personally, I'd stay away from conversations that, on the political realm can be divisive. I mean, particularly as a leader, I don't want people to feel that they can't talk to me, or that I may have a perspective about them because they have a political point of view that's different than my own. So as a leader, I think you have to be really careful in terms of what you're projecting, and help coach people along the way to really lean into what we can align on, because we're going to get a lot more done through what we align on when it comes to those kinds of things. Now, don't get me wrong, I like healthy debate and conflict with coming up with the best solutions for the business, and we have those conversations. But when it comes to more personal things like politics, particularly now, I just have seen that go bad, very badly. Work teams that were once collaborative that can no longer work together because they have these different political points of view that have come out, and that's not productive for the business.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful. Next question is from Maggie, and she's asking, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one here. Any advice for seeking leadership opportunities within a company? This is from AJ. Actually, and I missed one from Lydia. We'll come back to that too. But yeah, any advice for seeking leadership opportunities within a company?
Well, the thing that I say is, the way that I've always thought about leadership is, leadership is a perspective, and it's a way of behaving versus a position. And so oftentimes when we are identifying leaders, it's because they've demonstrated leadership already. So the first question I would have is, what is in your metron of rule? What is your responsibility, and how are you leading in that? And maybe it takes a bit of creativity, right? Because you might say, well, I don't know how I can lead in that. But I guarantee no matter what you do, every solution has not been thought of, and everything that can be done hasn't been done. And so that would be the first thing, is how are you leading where you are? And leading is, how are you bringing others along with you? Coming up with ideas or things that can be improved, that can be done differently, and bringing others along with you. And so I just feel like that can be done in so many different ways. And even if within your area of responsibility, you say, I don't really see that, but I guarantee somewhere in the company, there's something that isn't getting done. And it doesn't matter if it's in your job description or not. I always say too, opportunity oftentimes comes in the form of work. And you might say, well, I'm doing my day-to-day job, but then how are you demonstrating that you're capable of leading? And so that's just where I would start. And then it goes back to what I said earlier, which is how, making sure that people are aware, your leadership is aware that you're interested, because some people who don't want leadership roles, and that's okay too. But making sure they're clear on what it is you aspire to and your goals, and don't be apologetic for that. Being able to articulate how you're demonstrating leadership, and whether that's, within the company, or perhaps, many companies have charitable organizations. There's ways that you can get involved. Microsoft has so many different, connections and relationships where people can, there was a guy that led this entire Give campaign that helped to raise, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like, God, I didn't even know he could do that. And so that wasn't even his day-to-day job, but he raised his hand. And then it was like, wow, he has some real leadership. And it really, ended up he got a great job opportunity out of it. Not that that was the intention. I think he was very wanting to help with the Give campaign. But those are the things that I would say about how do you lean in to leadership. And then, give it some time, because, you might say, oh, I want a leadership right now, but there may not be any leadership roles, or, but I do believe in the power of intentionality, and just keep being faithful and doing what, you can do to help improve the business, and influencing and taking others along with you, having fun with it, and making people aware of what it is you want, and it'll come.
That's good. Thank you so much. All right. Lydia was asking, what advice would you give to someone that's starting a media company during the pandemic?
Oh, wow. Well, so what kind of media company is this? Is this like a podcast, or is this more of a like a written kind of thing? What kind of media are we talking about? Lydia, are you on?
Yeah, there she is. Looks like you're muted, Lydia.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Lydia.
Let's see.
You're muted.
There you go. Oh, Lydia, I still don't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Oh, goodness.
Uh-oh.
You know what? It might be, Lydia, if you can, look at the little mute button. Do you see? Oh, shucks. Lydia, if you don't mind, there's two ways to fix it. Either send us a little message, or if you could, go to the mute or the microphone, look at that little triangle and see if it's set up to select the microphone as same as system. See if that might help you.
This is getting
All right. Well, shucks. Well, maybe we'll come, Lydia, type in.
Maybe Lydia can type it.
Yeah, type it in if you don't mind. Yeah, if you don't mind, type that in and we'll come back to your question for sure. While we're waiting to hear back from Lydia, achieving commitment in people who work with you, motivation, how do you see that playing out? How do you do that in where you work?
Yeah, well, I think, I've had the fortunate opportunity to build a number of teams at Microsoft, which means that, I needed to hire people, I needed to identify who's the right fit. And I always look for it. It's a great question because I always look for that. I mean, I can train you how to do certain things. I cannot train you how to be motivated and committed.
Yeah.
So I think that, the key is what is the right match? I remember interviewing someone who was extremely talented and could do the job, but the motivation was off. She actually wanted to do different type of work. It was similar, but just different type of work. Even though she was capable, I didn't feel like it was a good fit. So I elected to hire someone else. And so I think it starts with making sure that you are screening for that when you're building your team or when you're filling a job, so that you don't have to come back and then try to figure out how to motivate people. So make sure you bake that into your interview question and really assess that with the talent that's coming through. And then sometimes life happens, right? That person who was super motivated, maybe in 6 months, a year, maybe they're not so motivated. And so what's important is to really stay connected with, your team. Hey, how are you doing? How are things going? And sometimes you may find the lack of motivation may have something to do with what's happening at home. It may have something to do with, hey, I think I've learned a lot at this, in this position, but I really want more responsibility, or I want something different. Like, you just have to stay connected with people. And I've been doing this in the last few weeks, been, having conversations with my team. I call them career conversations. And it's just this career guide that career planning guide that we use to ask questions about, hey, what makes a day great? What makes a day not so great? What do you see yourself doing, in the next few years? Or what skills do you have that you really want to leverage? What do you want to learn? So it's, I believe, as simple as making sure that dialogue is open and knowing that people evolve, they change. So what was motivating for them 6 months ago or a year ago may not be the motivation that they have later. But I think when you tap into it, oh man, it's easy to see the commitment.
Good. Thank you so much. Lydia is back with us. She's starting an online women's lifestyle magazine.
Sorry, my mic was off.
There
You are, Lydia. Okay, now we can hear you.
Yeah. Share a little bit about your company. Yeah.
Okay, it's called 722 Communications, and we're a group of minority women that want to start an online women's lifestyle magazine. So it would be like a regular magazine, just it can be, I guess, digested in multiple ways online, podcasts, visuals, photos, blogs, things like that.
So that's awesome. So it sounds like you have a team of people that you're already working with. You have, a really clear idea of what it is that the content. And so your question was, how do you start one? Or maybe repeat your question now that I'm clear on what you're talking about.
If you had any, just like, I guess, like general advice for, like, I guess a new company being started during the pandemic in general.
Yeah. Well, I love your idea because you're talking about we're all online. So you have a captive audience. I think that's great. Your medium is great. And I also like the idea that you're looking at various ways to deliver your content. You know, there's so many options now. So make sure you're also doing your research to make sure you're clear. I mean, podcast is great, but then, you know, how do you do that, right? There's multiple venues where you can deliver podcasts. You know, Microsoft owns LinkedIn. And so a lot of my colleagues are really into, like, you know, doing LinkedIn videos. You can do them right there within the social media app. But then again, you know, lifestyle versus business, and you might want to look at doing something on Twitter or another venue or Instagram. But I think relevancy is really important. So I do a lot of writing myself, and what I'm always thinking about is what's relevant right now, and versus, you know, what I want, you know, and certainly it can be about, well, what do I want to say? But it's got to be the marriage between what do I want to say and what do people really need to hear. Pray about it, right? What are the articles? What are the things that you really want to highlight? What do people need right now? And, you know, be intentional about it and be prayerful and have fun with it. But just remember that, you know, you're there to serve your audience. And so it'll mean you staying connected with what's being discussed or what questions people may have at that time. I also love provocative publications, so taking some risks and, you know, being provocative. I think that's interesting. And then, of course, all the other things, which, you know, was great visuals, interesting people, having interesting visuals in terms of your, you know, pictures and images and those kinds of things, you know.
That's good. Excellent. Best of luck to you, Lydia. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Cody has a question. He's asking, do you feel that the trust between organizations and individuals can sustain through a longer standing shelter in place? In other words, can trust and confidence be bolstered through further technological solutions or begin to erode due to this lack of physical interaction?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, we've had people who started the company only virtually. I mean, talk about trust. You're going to quit your other company and you're going to come work for Microsoft. You've never met these people in person, right?
Yeah.
I do think it depends. I think it depends. I'm going to go back to what I said about authenticity. I think that is such a powerful characteristic right now. And it could be in business, it could be in the media, whatever it is. But, you know, how do you maintain the sense of trust? I also think that having a level of transparency is really important. You know, employees, a lot of times they generally do know what's going on. Look, if the business isn't doing so well, you know, we want to sometimes sugarcoat things. Hey, it's great. It's, you know, but how do you balance, and you don't want people panicking, but then how do you balance that need for people to know with a level of transparency? It goes, you know, so all of those things I think are critical. And then that consistency over time. I'm not going to say it's easy. I will say for me as a leader, I get it right sometimes, and other times I don't do it as well as I'd like. But then there's another part of this, which I strongly believe in, which is self-care, right? It's taking care of ourselves, when, you know, getting enough rest. It's all this stuff, again, it's exacerbated. Like I've you know, drinking water like you should, eating the right kinds of foods like you should, like all of this stuff we have to do to take care of ourselves, so that when we show up, we can be our best selves, and we are clear, and we can think straight, and we can present ourselves with a level of authenticity that really represents what we're thinking and what we're feeling in a way that does develop trust. So, you know, I would say it's not easy. And at the same time, there are always going to also be people that say, I don't know about this. And you have to be okay with that, because people will make their own decisions, perhaps leave the company, or even, you know, move to a different department. But I guess that just would be, you know, my advice to try to keep that trust up long term.
That's good. Thank you. That's great. This is a great Follow-up question, really. Kelly was asking about your thoughts on employee reentry strategies and timing, and any advice for leadership for team bonding while staying work from home.
Oh my gosh. People have been so creative. I think this is the time, what to say, necessity is the mother of invention. Just different creative things that people have done. Like, for example, in the beginning of meetings, people do check in within, this is my experience in my company. Hey, show us the gift that represents how you're feeling right now. Or, that's just like a fun way to kind of bond before you jump into the meat of the meeting. We've had these virtual, kind of happy hours. We call them happy hours, but, you come and you can talk and you don't have to be drinking anything necessarily. It's just really a time to come together and check in. And I do think that there can be some really special bonding through this challenging experience we're all living globally and together in this really weird way. I think just about every meeting I start is, hey, how are you? And you chat a little bit about family and about what you're dealing with. And I don't know. I don't know that I would say that that's been every meeting in the past, but it's almost like taking this situation and turning it on its head. Can we have stronger relationships through this?
Good.
There has been some letting up. I was just on a call today where one of my leaders was like, hey, what if we came into my backyard and like socially distant and just like, saw each other, and would you guys be open to that? And and if you are not, that's okay. I think there was like, I don't know, 8 people on the call, and we're kind of messing with him a bit because he has a very big home and a very big backyard. And so you're like, I think we could be socially distant in your backyard, and some people may not be comfortable with that. But I know for me that I've done some one-on-ones with some, my colleagues, gone on walks and things like that. That's been really cool. I don't know that what I would have done that otherwise. But people are craving for, again, human connection, and where you're comfortable having that, one-on-one or one-on-2 or 3. And then really, taking your everyday meetings and checking in, and then just scheduling time with people virtually just to say how you doing and have some fun with it and creativity.
That's great. Any other questions that you have for Monica? Oh, Ash, sorry. Ash has got a question. When welcoming a new employee to your team, do you have an example of how you would welcome religion, diversity into the workplace without sounding one-sided?
What's happening within the workplace? I remember, years ago, you would just never talk about this. But, what I'm seeing is space for employee resource groups of multiple different religions, employees that want to come together around their faith. And again, that's something, I don't know if you all are seeing that, but I'm seeing that at different companies. And so it makes this conversation a lot easier, around, welcoming diversity. I will also tell you, within my company, there's a group of us that meet from my church, and we just get together, every now and then. Now, obviously with COVID, we haven't been able to do that, physically, but it's not a permission, kind of thing. It's just the pastor's wife actually works at Microsoft. And so she's just like, hey, let's get together. And we do, we share. So I don't think that's against the rules or anything like that. And people are getting together all the time around things. So I actually think it's a lot easier to do now more than ever. It says, when welcoming an employee to your team, do you have an example of how you welcome diversity in the workplace? Welcoming a new employee. Maybe I'm not understanding.
Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my example is we have great diversity within the company that I work for, but just because you have good diversity doesn't mean a lot of folks feel comfortable sharing their beliefs or their faith or their religion. And so I'm trying to figure out, with the influence that I have in my position, how do I welcome in the right words and terms so that they don't feel like, oh, because I'm Christian, they can't talk about faith or their religion, that they, like, you know what I mean? I don't want to sound one-sided, but I want to encourage and engage that, it's welcome here. I don't, that's what I'm saying. I don't really know how to include that in their orientation, how to include that in their welcome package besides, hey, we welcome diversity, we welcome religion. I think that's what we're missing is the proper steps on explaining that so that they really truly do feel welcome, unless we just allow them to get to a place where they open up with our fellow partners and employees, and then allow them that space whenever they're ready, so that we're not forcing it on. And in that case, I feel like maybe I'm not doing my job and in sending that message out sooner.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you're fostering a workplace that is truly diverse and inclusive, it's not about any one particular dimension. It is just in general. And so you have to think about, how are you as a leader showing up around the diversity dimensions that you reflect. What you're doing is you want to create a culture, regardless of what the diversity dimension is, where it's clear, people know. I mean, I was in a call with my team, and I have a team member who grew up in India, and she openly talked about her faith. And it's not a faith that I share or know much about, but I was thrilled that she was comfortable talking about that. And so, what that said to me was, she was comfortable enough that I had created an environment where she was comfortable enough to open up. And I shared it that I was a Christian and talked about what that meant to me. And, so the question really is, how do you create the cultural environment where people are open to express who they are authentically? And I think part of it is how, to the extent that you do that as a leader, and then what are the barriers that may be getting in the way if people don't feel comfortable?
Good. Very helpful. Well, if you don't mind, one more question. I know it's almost 8, but could you let us know if you had any advice for reinventing your career after 50 without devaluing yourself? Carolina had this question.
Yeah. Hey, 50 is the new 20. What do you mean? 50 is great. I just love reinvention. And I honestly think that, man, my husband's a good example. I should let him answer this question because, he decided at 51 or so, that he decided he was going to come out of corporate America. Look, my husband's an MBA, he's a project manager, he's Scrum, he's PMP certified, and all of that, and decided, I don't want to do that anymore. And it was like, I want to go into the ministry. And so he's a care pastor at our church, but how different is that, right? And here he is, at the church, he's like, people are late and, he's like, it's like project managing everything. It's like, this is different. So I love the fact. So first of all, I'd say give yourself permission to do that. I think it's beautiful. And I just think it represents evolution, right? In our lives, what we wanted to do when we were 20 or 30 or in our 40s may be different than what we want to do in our 50s. And again, in our 60s, we may do something else. So first, give yourself permission, and then get yourself trained. I don't know what shift that you want to make, if it's like related to what you're doing now or something completely different. But the beauty is, with access to information on the internet and people, man, it's so easy. It's easier now than it ever has been to make that kind of a shift. So get good at your craft, and I would even say prepare to make that transition now. So, I know Steve started even before he moved into the ministry, learning about the ministry and studying and, sitting down with our pastors, like, hey, tell me what a day in the life is like. So you don't have to necessarily wait till that, transition. And then when you're ready and you've done the preparation, lean into it, because you're going to learn more by doing, and give yourself grace, because you're not going to be, an expert at something in the very beginning, compared to when you've done it for, a few years. So that's what I would have to say about that. But yeah, definitely go for it.
Very helpful. There is one more question that came in. Do you mind one more, Monica?
No, not at all.
It's a big one. How do you believe the economy will be impacted by COVID? And do you have any suggestions for smaller companies to plan and adjust?
Yeah, man, I wish I had the, the crystal ball on this one. It's really hard to say. I mean, in some cases, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be, negative impact. I mean, like for our company, the stock just keeps going up, and I don't really understand why. So, there's a saying, you probably heard of it, which was just never let a good crisis go to waste. There's also a symbol in, I think it's Mandarin, and it means danger, but it also means opportunity. And so what I would say about this economy is that we're hearing about job losses, and there's just these headlines that sound so devastating. And at the same time, there are just some businesses that are absolutely booming. I mean, look, we're on Zoom. We put Zoom on the map, right?
Yeah.
Think about, we have a nephew who's in he has a cleaning business. I mean, he can't keep up with the business that he has. And so, there's a little bit of, how do we identify where there will be opportunity? Because there always is, even in a down economy. Can we make that shift towards that? Maybe not. I don't know. But just recognize that is the case. That there's not always terrible. It's not always, there is going to be opportunity for some people. Wild opportunity. How do you identify that? Suggestions for smaller companies to plan and adjust. The fact that you're even asking the question, I think, is great, because you have to be agile. What was important before or worked well before may not work well later. And depending on the business that you're in, how do you pay attention to the trends? And then again, it's a little bit of thinking, the Wayne Gretzky thing you guys have heard, thinking about skate to where the puck is going before the puck gets there. Like, how do you think like that as you plan for your small adjustments that you might make in your small business? Take advantage of everything that's available, whether it's loans or those kinds of things that you might need. And then really also talk to your employees. It's amazing the creativity that people are coming up with. And if we're kind of holding hands, we know we're in this together and we need to be creative and solve a problem. There's these gems that kind of pop out in these kind of pressure situations that you might just be surprised by. But oftentimes, the answer's right there in front of us. So leverage your employees in different ways too. You'll be surprised to see what they can do. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's
very helpful. Hey, can we thank Monica for joining us? If you haven't done the claps out of your reaction at the bottom, that's one way. Thank you so much, Monica. Really grateful. Thank you for all of you who have joined us. Keep an eye out for an email from Carolina if you're interested in getting involved in more events in the future. We also have an event like this, free workshop for couples next Tuesday night, Discovering Your Purpose in 2 weeks. And you can find more details about that at gatewaychurch.com. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Blessings in your business. All right. Bye-bye.